Welcome back to another episode of Sabres versus the Atlantic. In this series of mini episodes that we have been doing in the lead up to the 24-25 NHL season, we have been pitting the Sabres up against their Atlantic Division foes, comparing their lineups, talking about the other team's storylines, main additions, key subtractions in the offseason, and deciding who we think comes out on top. We are down to 2 episodes and 2 teams, and they both reside in the state of Florida. So, as always, my name is Jonah,
I'm Christian.
and I decided to bring a friend back on here to talk
Friend is
about
a stretch.
I
to
don't I
talk.
don't get to just jump in on the little round
I well,
table
I
intro.
I feel
I
like
get
you
my
you
own little
deserve a
spiel
better
here.
introduction. I feel like you deserve a proper introduction. Do you not? I mean, you know what? The floor is yours. Go
Hey,
ahead.
it's your podcast. No, it's your podcast.
Reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, who are you and what are you doing in our meeting?
Well, I was just watching Monday Night Football. Need Bijan to get a touchdown for a few parlays. Shout out Prague picks. And then I got a text message saying join the Zoom. So here I am. Don't really know what we're talking about, but hopefully I pick it up as we go. And I'm Jesse once again. Thanks for having me back, guys.
Of course, of course. I mean, at this point, you've made, I think, you have like 3 or 4 months between your appearances on here, but that might be more than JP has had in the same span of time. So,
I
yeah, you might be an honorary co-host at this point.
I forgot JP was on this podcast.
I can never fill JP's shoes though, man.
This
in
is
our group chat tonight, I didn't even text him to ask if he was coming on. I just said, Chris just said, Christian, Jesse's coming on with us tonight.
yeah, but don't get it twisted. This is actually my replacement, guys. So going forward, I will probably be seen less and less, and you will see more of Jesse in the future. So it's been a fun run.
Just a general phasing out. In any case, the reason that Jesse is on today, we'll be talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning, who is one of it feels dirty to say, but it is one of his favorite teams. I don't know. I feel like it's just
Well,
two favorite teams.
so the way I've always put it is that when I'm watching sports, I like to have a team to root for. And so when the Sabres aren't in the playoffs, which has been pretty much my entire time watching the NHL, I like to have a team to root for. So that ended up being Tampa Bay, and I've grown into a pretty big fan of them as well. But it's 1A, 1B with the Sabres is 1A. Let's not get it twisted.
In any case, Jesse is a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning, so I thought it was only fair to bring him on and we could discuss their offseason, which honestly, out of all the off seasons that we have talked about thus far, this one was probably the most seismic and most interesting because the Tampa Bay Lightning probably had the closest thing to an NHL dynasty that we have seen this generation. Nearly three-peated, had the repeat, and yet we've seen 2 faces out of that core gone. Steven Stamkos is no longer a Tampa Bay Lightning, which is insane to say, and neither is Mikhail Sergachev. 2 key pieces of that near dynasty. And I mean, Stamkos, talk about somebody that you just can't picture in another jersey, and you're going to have to this upcoming season.
And you're seeing all these pictures on Twitter of him and getting the warm welcome in Nashville and wearing the jersey for photos, and it's just still isn't sitting right.
Well, we're going to talk about the Lightning's moves, some of their storylines heading into next season, and then finally pitting them up against the Sabres. Before we jump into it, to recap their last season, the Tampa Bay Lightning went 45, 29, and 8 for a total of 98 points, 4th in the Atlantic, and they lost in round 1 in 5 games to the Florida Panthers, the other resident of Florida who we will be closing this series with next week. Jesse, as a fan, tell me what you thought about their last season, and I guess what it means moving forward. I guess when the season ended, you didn't expect the turnover that was coming, but what did you think about their end to the season? Did you feel like maybe this was the end of a certain era in Tampa Bay?
Well, I remember watching this series, and it was a lot closer than a 5 game series. I mean, obviously, Florida was always going to win, but I remember a few questionable calls that helped me sleep at night after they just got rinsed in 5 games. But I liked some of the deadline moves with like Duclair, and I think he kind of helped their lineup. And there was always the question with him, maybe him coming back, but then like he needed Stamkos back, so didn't really think about him at all. And then Gensel out of nowhere, just like I think I saw the rumor like 3 or 4 days before it happened, and I was like, what? And then the trade happened, and then went from thinking about possibly getting Duclair back to having Gensel, and then thinking, oh well, if Gensel and Stamkos, like the top six, going to be insane. I did not think for 1 second that Stamkos was not going to be back on this team until noon on, was it June 1st? I don't
July
July
1st,
1st.
July
yeah.
July
1st.
1st.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's my inexperience there. Christian will always have that on me. So I remember the game 5 when they lost. I think it was Bucci, which just makes it even worse. He was just going on and on. They had the camera on Stamkos, looked like he was gonna cry. They're like, is this the end of an era? And I was just, I think I was in this exact seat watching my TV, just pissed off. Like, why would they even consider this a possibility?
And it was.
And who knew? It's crazy. And now I'm looking at this projected lineup, and Cam Atkinson is in the vacated Stamkos spot, and it's crazy, man. It was a roller coaster of a off season for sure.
Yeah, you're looking at a completely different Tampa Bay Lightning lineup this upcoming season. So I don't know. This could be one of the more volatile teams in the division. So
Somehow we went from Stamkos to Zemgus Girgensons hopping from the Sabres to Tampa, and Luke Glendening still hanging
that
around, Connor
man,
Sheary, and just, oh man.
that man is single-handedly going to weigh you guys out of a playoff spot. He brings that aura with him wherever he goes, and the
I
only
mean,
place he's been is Buffalo. So
I remember a time when he was first place in All-Star voting, so you never know what Zemgus you're gonna get here, you know?
Gergensons or Stamkos, which one was the more shocking departure? Anyways, we've seen a slow descent in Tampa Bay down the overall NHL standings, and they're still, as you saw last season, a 98-point team. That's a good hockey team, but largely it came off the back of just an insane season from Nikita Kucherov. I mean, 144 points, 100 assists. Like, good God, what a year from him. But
What more do you need to do for the Hart Trophy?
but that slow descent, they're getting older. Well, they were getting older, sort of, got younger by shipping Stamkos out, or letting him go essentially, and replacing him with Gensel, and then also kind of getting older by bringing in guys like McDonough, and but younger again by bringing in somebody like JJ Moser. So, what what is this team going to look like? Are they as volatile as Christian kind of hinted at? So why don't we take a look at more of their key departures and additions? So, as we just spent a good chunk of time talking about Stamkos, without a doubt, just their most shocking departure, letting him go to free agency. It was a saga that we saw evolve over the past year. I mean, seemed like every core guy there, from Point to Cheranak to even Sergachev, like got their big payday with Tampa post Stanley Cups, and they just weren't seemingly able to. They didn't want to dish out that money to him. And then additionally, Sergachev, who they dealt on day 2 of the draft to Utah for JJ Moser and Connor Geeky, just completely shocking trade. Then Duclair obviously went on to sign with the Islanders in free agency. Matt Dumba went to Dallas. Tyler Mott went to, I think, Detroit. So did Austin Watson. And then Barry Bleuet went to Montreal. So, as we were alluding to, I mean, it was funny because Christian and I did Toronto last week, and that was the offseason that was supposed to be like the big shakeup of a core. And here we are, and it's seemingly Tampa Bay. Jumping over to their additions, obviously their biggest one, Jake Gensel, acquiring him shortly before free agency and then signing him to a 7-year, $9 million per season deal. Just a whopper of a contract. Securing the biggest guy on the market without even letting him get to the market. Additionally, they got Ryan McDonagh in a trade from the Nashville Predators. He had a really good resurgence season last year, so we'll look to see if bringing him back and putting him in that Sergachev role will work out. Obviously, you got J.J. Moser from the Sergachev trade. And then additionally, they inked Zemgus Girgensons to a 3-year deal worth $850K per season, which 3 years at that price, considering his last deal with the Sabres was 2.5. It's pretty good work by Tampa. I mean, I know state income tax has kind of been the talk of the offseason, past few off seasons with all these Florida teams winning cups, but still, that's some good value from Girgensons. And then finally, Cam Atkinson, 1 year at $900K. Jesse, looking at this from afar, what do you feel? Do you think they brought more in than sent out?
I mean, for starters, I can't believe Matt Dumba made this graphic as a key departure. Like I despised watching him play in the Florida series. I feel he looked horrible on defense and he had like two open nets. For some reason he was right in the crease that he just couldn't bury.
I'm so happy I brought you on for takes like these. I would not
Like
have viciously attacked him as much as you just did.
no, like he just I remember like Twitter saying like, "Oh, maybe we bring Dumba back now." And it's just like, "Oh my God." I never despised Tyler Mott. I think he was a decent guy to have around, and I feel like Beret Boulay was just up and down. Like some games he was playing with Point and Kucherov, and then he's next day he's getting sent back to Syracuse. So he never really found his footing with the Lightning. So, um, but moving on, I'm very excited to see Gensel play alongside Point and Kucherov. I feel like that left wing spot you really can't mess up too much with how Point and Kucherov have played together and how they've looked with Palat and Hagel and Bray too. And just really anyone they slot in there can't really mess up too much. And I remember being upset when McDonough left. He was in the two cup runs, he was always like a massive lockdown defenseman that was just so nice to have for penalty killing or just closing out a game. So definitely excited to have him back, even though he's even older than when we had him before. He definitely looked good last year. And I remember sitting on the couch when the Sergachev deal happened.
Much like the rest of
And
us, just kind of watching Bill Daly walk up there and say, "Oh, I have a trade to announce." Like, "Oh, I wonder what it could
well,
be."
I wasn't even watching the draft. I don't even remember what house I was at. I was just on the couch and my phone was on the coffee table, picked it up and opened Instagram, and the first thing I see was what's that Instagram? The hockey one. They post all the trades and stuff.
NHL.
No, no, it's not. No, that's a good one though. No, it was what's it called?
Getting a notif from a hockey account on Instagram is like an evil way to find out
Was
one
it
of your
like I
favorite
think it's
players
just
has been
like
traded.
NHL discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, NHL
Uh,
discussion. Is like the black background, white lettering, just pictures, just Sergachev being traded.
It's like
Just
no
completely
way that could be
blindsided.
real.
Wasn't expecting it whatsoever. It was like, wow. Like just didn't even like I was beginning to think about the possibility of losing Stamkos. Didn't even think about Sergachev at all. And I remember the more I thought about it though, I didn't hate the return on it as much as initially. Like you're like, what's like you freak out about the trade and whatnot. But for getting McDonough back and then shipping him out, they definitely needed a depth defenseman like Moser, and I think he fills that and what they need. And then I'm also very excited for Geeky. Like I think I've always been like he's just a beast in the forward. He'll
The Tampa Bay
fill this.
prospect pool, they needed this type of trade. I mean,
They
not
they
only just getting
definitely
Moser, a young defenseman, but yeah, Geeky's a really solid prospect. So I did like that as well.
they definitely upped their prospect pool with that one. And he scored in the Prospect Challenge today against Florida, so suck it, Florida. But um, when Gergensons leaves in 3 years, that massive hole might get filled by Geeky when he eventually makes the NHL. So something to look
3 years.
forward to.
I don't know. Maybe the Atkinson one too,
Jesus.
because apparently he's playing in the top six. It's going to be interesting to see how Gensel fits on there. Um, I don't know. I'm just interested to see how he fits. I don't think he's a byproduct of someone like Sidney Crosby, and even if he was, I mean, hey, he's going to play with Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point, so I'm sure he'll do just fine. I don't know. I'm interested to see how he fits in there, and I'm interested to see if McDonough is, the kind of career revival he had last season. Is it something that can continue? I mean, it's no secret he's not getting any younger, but yeah, I mean, I like the Gergensons edition. I like Atkinson is probably fine if he's on your top six. That's probably not going to be the greatest, but um,
I
I think
should have went
Moser.
after Zucker instead.
I think Moser was a good addition for that defense group as well. I think the Sergachev trade made sense. I just thought it would have made a lot more sense if it cleared cap for Stamkos, but obviously that didn't happen.
That was the initial thought when I was like, oh yeah,
I would
okay.
say that was most people's initial thoughts, but obviously that did not happen.
I don't know. I think I'm going to take a little more of a pessimistic view here. I don't think you get better losing a Sergachev. I don't think you get better losing a Steven Stamkos. Um, Two guys who were integral pieces into multiple deep cup runs. And yes, you replaced him with a certified stud goal scorer in Jake Gensel and a absolutely ridiculous shutdown depth forward in Zemgus Girgensons. But I think this might be a little bit of a readjustment period for the Lightning. You basically mini nuked your core. You got new guys coming in. It's a good thing you got a little bit younger, but also I think John Cooper is going to have to figure out how to integrate these guys into the team and what they built as a culture, like almost on the fly. Because a lot of turnover it's still, for as good of players they are, a lot of turnover still will affect your roster. And I think it'll be a little bit of an adjustment period for the Lightning. Maybe they take a little bit of a step back this year. Or I'm completely wrong, and that Gensel line with Point and Kucherov just explodes and they win the division again. Who knows? But I'd probably lean towards the first, and I'd say that they take a little bit of a step back.
I think while it's obviously going to hurt, the wound is still fresh. I do think I feel like we can agree Gensel is the better player than Stamkos at this point in his career. So while it stinks and maybe it does hurt the team, and you lose your captain. I mean, obviously it's gonna hurt you at the very least, probably
I was gonna
off the
say
ice.
I think that's the mindset that most of the fan base has, but they're
Yeah,
never gonna admit that.
I think the risk, something that could come back to bite them is Sergachev. I mean, he didn't play. I mean, he barely played for them last year, but he's still a staple. Uh, the reason they've still been able to compete in those post Cup years. I just think I think the McDonough thing could very well uh, bite them in the ass. Just last season, he was just in a great system with the Nashville Predators. They had an amazing season, so maybe they're trying to lean on him too much and it doesn't go well. And Moser, I don't, Moser's a good player. He's not Sergachev, so I can see how a pessimistic person would kind of see this, and even losing somebody like Duclair in your middle six, I think. Who would you rather have in your top six, him or Cam Atkinson? I don't think Duclair is a perfect player, but I think I know my answer. So it's it's it it's interesting. I don't know quite what to think about them just yet.
I mean, how else would you reward a guy like Sergachev fighting back, like recovering from a fracture in his leg for playing a playoff game 2 months later, then shipping him out at the draft? Like
To
that's just
Utah.
yeah. They don't even have a name.
All right, well, why don't we move into some of the key storylines heading into next season? All right, Jesse, for this next graphic, close your eyes, look
I
away.
mean, this is exactly the picture I was talking about
for
earlier. That I just
for our non YouTube listeners, I do have a picture of Steven Stamkos in a Nashville Predators in the full kit on the screen right now. So
He's having a
He
having
looks
a
weird
nice
in the
August
yellow,
day.
man.
he
He
looks
looks
so
Having a nice
weird.
unhappy.
August day, and you just open up Twitter, and one of your buddies DMs you something that you guys send each other funny stuff all the time,
I
and
was
you
the
just
one that sent that to
open it up, and it's just
me.
Stamkos in a Preds jersey,
I
cheesing.
I forgot about that. I was the one that sent this picture to Jesse.
He's definitely
Ah,
not cheesing in that picture.
I'm sorry. He knows. He knows. They did that photo shoot early too. Like they wasted no time just to.
Oh no, there was a video too of him in like a Predators polo holding his kid in a
Oh man.
Stamkos jersey, Predators, and they're all like
All
clapping
right.
for him while he's
I'm
walking into the facility.
I'm sorry. I don't want to like cause a mental breakdown here. I'm sorry.
No,
I
you
won't
did
make
in
this mistake
August.
again.
You did
You're
it
gonna
in
crash
August. I'm
out in
good
real
now.
time.
I'm good now, dude.
You
My
got a
bad.
real time
My bad.
crash out going.
Anyways, key storyline number one. We sort of talked about it, but Stamkos is gone. And while I think we can acknowledge Gensel is the better player at this point, can he fill that void that Stamkos left? Can he take on maybe some sort of leadership role, and at the very least, can he match Stamkos' production? I mean, Stamkos' production was still high last season, even if most of it was power play plus Kucherov inflated. Is he going to be able to fill that spot? That's my first question.
I think it's a little unfair to put Gensel in a position where he needs to step into a leadership role. I think that would be more well suited for other vets that have been around the team for a long time, maybe like a Kucherov or a Braden Point, for instance. I think Gensel definitely needs to produce and or outproduce what Stamkos was, putting on the stat sheet. But when it comes to the actual leadership role, I think that'll get shifted to another department in the short term, but he's going to be there for a long time, so he's got to step up at some point in that aspect.
It's unfair, but it's inevitable
Right,
because
yeah, because you're losing the
yeah,
captain for a
yeah,
guy who comes in and you're immediately like, okay, well,
yeah.
you got to be the captain now. It's like,
It definitely does hurt him coming in. Like people are definitely going to expect him to be as good, if not better, and it just makes it where he cannot fail in the eyes of everybody because they will be the first to turn on him and say we really let our captain walk just for this guy to come in and not produce.
right.
I don't think they're gonna have any issues leadership wise because I think Hedman steps right into that role as the captain. And I mean, they gave Kucherov an A last year. I don't know if he necessarily is the best guy to have as a leader because of the fiery attitude and the dumb stuff he does every now and then. I definitely think
Mm.
Point should be considered to step up and
I kind of
probably
thought I don't
earn
know
an A.
why as a non-Tampa fan, but I don't know. Point just kind of seems like that guy in terms of like Hedman's on the decline. Kucherov, I feel like he's the type of guy you just want him to do his thing and not really worry about that. But Point, kind of feel like he's almost the heartbeat of that team, at
Mm.
least in how he plays. So I don't know. It's
I
just
could
kind of like that workhorse. The workhorse guy should get to see.
I kind of
I
like the
could
sound of headman as the head man, as you would say, or the captain.
I could definitely see him being more of like a bridge captain, like play out the rest of his career in Tampa, and then
Marchand
probably
esque.
if Point still is kicking it, then well, I mean he's got what 6 years left, so I could see him being the guy when Hedman calls it later on. But I think the role that Gensel definitely needs to fill the most is on the power play because trade that's where he's going to suffer the most too because he's a lefty and that just shapes a totally different look on the power play where you have Kucherov on the right, Stamkos on the left, Point in the bumper, and all three of them can score at any time. And now throw a lefty where the righty's supposed to be, and you know you're not going to get any one timers from him. So how does that change up how that's going to look? Where now you only have one timer side, You know he loves going to point in the bumper. And it's just that's the that's the role that I'm most curious to see him try to fill and see how well he's going to do because I don't think he's going to have any issue filling the role on the point production side. I think he's going to have a pretty nice season playing with a guy as pass first as Kucherov loves to be.
Secondly, McDonough and Moser. Can they fill the void that Sergachev left? Now, as I stated, Sergachev obviously barely played last year, and Tampa did pretty well. But still, it's a storyline to talk about. Can McDonough repeat what he did last season, and can Moser step in and kind of maybe take a step and turn into a top four defenseman? I think that's one of the keys if they want to kind of because I feel like we can acknowledge like Kucherov is probably not going to have the same level of season, so I feel like they kind of need to balance it out on the back end a bit, and I don't know, can those two help with that?
I definitely like having McDonough. If you gave me the option of McDonough and Moser or Sergachev, I probably would take McDonough and Moser. Tampa's got two guys from the Florida series, two defensemen who were playing in the prospect challenge. They were iced in the playoffs. It was Lilleberg and Crozer, and they were both on the roster for the prospect challenge.
That does
And
that does put things into perspective a bit. I guess I didn't
I
realize
think,
that.
yeah, because Sergachev didn't play until game 5. So you had it was Hedman, Radish, Chernak, Perbix, and then Lilleberg and Crozer were the bottom 6. So you bring in McDonough and Moser, who, well, one has significantly more experience than the other, but Moser's played in the NHL a little bit more than those other two guys. So it definitely solidifies the three pairings a little bit better than the situation they had in the playoffs where they have two rookies, two prospects out there trying to go up against the eventual Stanley Cup champions. So I think the position that they're in now defensively is a little bit better than how they finished off last year.
No, I was just gonna say I could agree that they seemed fine without Sergachev last year. It's still a blow that they're gonna lose him, but getting that value for him and still having McDonough and JJ Moser in your defense core, I don't think they'll miss him, but I don't think they'll struggle as much. You'll always miss the presence of a Sergachev, but if you have tools to replace him, uh, you just move forward.
You can recreate him in the aggregate.
Right, exactly.
All right, and lastly, is their window closed? Do these changes close that window? I think can this team still make the playoffs? I think the answer is going to be absolutely they can. Are are round wins? Can they still get 2 to 3 rounds deep into the playoffs? I think all these changes, what is it in service of? I mean, I feel like if you sign somebody like a Jake Gensel at his age and in his prime, I would imagine that Tampa GM Julian Breezeball wants to still win rounds, and I would imagine most of this core still wants to. So, can they do it? Is there a higher ceiling of this team still there to be unlocked?
I think they unlocked more of a long-term solution to something that they were going to have to address at some point with their core aging. And as I stated before, losing a Sergachev and a Stamkos is not going to help your team in the short term, no matter who you get back for him. I mean, um, Jake Gensel's he's a star player, don't get me wrong, but like you're changing up a major piece of your team's identity for such a long time. I think in the short term, they're definitely going to take a step back, but I think they're setting themselves up for more long-term sustainability. I would say their cup window as of now it is closed, but another window could definitely be opening up pretty soon.
I definitely don't think the window is closed. On the contrary to what you were saying, Christian. I think it definitely comes down to having Vasilevsky in that, and I think he has the potential. I know he's been outshadowed or outshined the past couple of years by like Hellebuck and Shesterkin and all that,
And Jonas
but
Johansson.
Jonas Johansson, yeah.
The
But
real number one goalie in Tampa.
I think as long as you have him in the net and you have the core top six minus Cam Atkinson up front, I think there's always a chance that they could get hot and make a run. Like I remember thinking they had a shot at beating Florida at one point, which seems like nonsense right now, but I definitely thought that they were a good matchup, and obviously it didn't turn out that way. But to say that the cup window now is officially closed, I don't think you can. Um, I think they have a bunch of pieces that work well together with what they've done in their last few. I mean, they still have a couple guys kicking it, like Sorelli's still around. Hagel, he had a rough start, but he definitely picked it up last year. And I mean, you still got Hedman, Chernak on that insane deal for no reason. Bringing McDonough back, it definitely looks like a better situation than they had last year, where they were scraping, bringing in Dumba at the deadline, which was absurd. But
I didn't realize he was such a sore topic. Damn.
yeah, no, I don't think he was a key departure by any
Yeah,
means. But
because Tampa Bay fans have had it so bad.
well, no, I'm just saying to say that their cup window is dead is a little bit of an overstatement, but I
No,
definitely
I
think
agree with that. I don't think it's dead. I was just saying I feel like it may have closed a bit just in the short term. But like I
no,
said, you got Gensel, you got all those dogs. I think
Just not as
maybe a year or
easy.
two
I
from now,
mean,
I
it
was
won't be
it's
as
it's
easy.
yeah.
nowhere near like you don't have
I
that.
do agree that it's definitely a lot more closed than it was in say 21 and 22, but
Mhm.
I'd say
Yeah.
it's still open for the most part is where I'll leave that.
Yeah, they were a given for the conference finals every year for like I don't know, 3, 4 seasons. They were just like, yeah, they'll probably be there. But
Except that
now
one
you
season.
yeah. Wonder what happened. Um yeah, but other than that, I don't think you could just rush to say that about, this new core of guys. It's more of like a believe it when you see it, which is kind of an insane thing to say about the Lightning because they've proved so much over the last few years, but you have turnover, you get the right to say that stuff again.
I definitely agree that this is more of a question to revisit in like the middle of
Yeah.
October
Yeah, we'll
or
see.
maybe even November when you see like a month of how this team looks playing together with Gensel and Point and Kucherov and see if that line gels as well as it's expected to. And I know it's a Sabres podcast, so we probably won't talk about it, but
I'll close with this last question. Do you think this is their last best chance? Like, do you think from here on out it gets harder and harder to win the cup? Like McDonough's not getting any younger. Same with somebody like Hedman and Vasilevsky even. You know, do you think this is like the last year? Like each year, is it going to get harder and harder? Do you think like somebody like Geeky, or do you think maybe there's a bigger reset coming in the future? I don't know. Do you think this is maybe like their last grasp at the cup?
I'm a little I'm a little hesitant to call it the last dance, but I mean, the cap's always going up. Like these players aren't going to make that much more money in the future. Like I think Kucherov's coming up in like 2, 3 years. I don't see him being a guy that demands 14, 15. Like I think he really values wins more than how much money he's making with how much fun he had winning those two cups. Like seeing all the videos on Twitter of him like just having the time of his life celebrating those cups.
Hey,
I don't see him
oh no, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I see him being a team friendly deal guy as much as he can be with like the cap going up and maybe like 10.5 jump from the 9.5 maybe. But I mean, they got all their guys long term, and I could see them maybe holding on 2, 3 more years, maybe with this core group, and possibly having more cap space to sign a better second line right winger than Cam Atkinson in the future. But we'll see.
Listen, good times are good times, and I'm sure Kucherov had a great time winning those Stanley Cups, as I would too. But honestly, at the end of the day, money talks, and if you're putting up 120 something points a season, you are going to get paid.
Especially in his last big payday.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me? His last big payday, he's gonna want as much money as he can get. But
And it's not that he won't
being in
deserve it
Tampa,
either.
you get the state income tax stuff. Maybe you take a little bit of a
It'll come in
discount.
lower. Like he
Yeah, yeah, a
won't.
little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. I will. I don't think he takes another like team for like he'll. What's he at now? Like 9.5.
9.5, yeah.
He'll get into like the 13s at this point.
It's
All
a
right.
solid estimation.
Why don't we get into the two teams' lineups? All right. So, as always, both of these teams' lineups are courtesy of the Daily Faceoff. So, if these lineups look different to what you would make them, or just how consensus is in, say, the Tampa Bay community, this is per the Daily Faceoff's website. So, as always, with the Sabres, your top line, Paterka, Thompson, Tuck. Second line, Zucker, Cousins, Quinn. Greenway, McLeod, Benson, Malenstein, Lafferty, Aube, Kubel. On the defensive side of things, Byram and Dahlin, Power and Yoki Haru, Samuelson and Clifton, and then Annette, Luukkonen, and Levi, with Krebs, Bryson, and Reimer as your extras. Moving over to Tampa Bay, Jake Ensel is on the top line with Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov. Hagel is with Sorelli and Atkinson. Sheary is with Paul and Eismont. And on the fourth line, you got Zemgus Girgensons with Glendening and Chafee. On the defensive side, you have Hedman with Radish, McDonough with Chernak, Moser with Perbix, and then in net, you have Vasilevsky with Johansson, and your extras are Lilleberg and Ilonen. So, usually I turn this over to Christian, but Jesse, I need your honest opinion.
Yes.
Christian can go if he wants.
No. You're the
I don't
guest.
want to overstep. I don't want to
Sir,
overstep.
you
here.
are the guest.
Well, for starters, I think that's the happiest I've ever seen Nick Paul. So that's just a good start to analyzing
It
this.
was probably Game 7 against Toronto.
Probably. That was a good game. I think if you're looking at the first line, it's hard to going up against any other team really to give anyone else the upper hand rather than Tampa when you're comparing top lines. And I would say top sixes, but Cam Atkinson as your second line right winger does not look as good as maybe a Jack Quinn when you're questioning who you would rather have. I'd probably say Quinn over Cam Atkinson on the second line, but I like the Sabres' depth a little bit better. I mean, Nick Paul kind of carries the third line, and I think Eyssimont a bit underrated. I think he plays the game the right way, and he always gives his all. But looking at depth here, I definitely like what the Sabres did in the offseason compared to how Tampa brought in old Sabres depth to fill in their depth holes. And Luke Glendening still kicking it when he gets sent out there to win faceoffs, and that's about it. Moving to the defense, I've always been an advocate for Hedman being one of the best defensemen in the league at playing defense. I know the
you might get some tomatoes
Norris,
thrown at you if you went online and said that today.
The Norris trophies kind of turned into the offensive defenseman award, so Hedman will never win another one. But I think if Hedman and McDonough played as a pairing, I think you'd find a tough time finding a better pairing that'll just lock down pretty much anybody. But I think for a 1-2 tandem, you give it to the Sabres, but I mean Vasilevsky.
It feels weird to say like I would say Luukkonen had the better year than Vasilevsky, but it's almost weird to I think Luukkonen's the better one than Vasilevsky. It's just something you could probably never say. But
It's like sacrilege.
It's tough to argue when Vasilevsky's been as dominant for how long as he's been.
Mhm.
I guess I can give like an overall breakdown of this roster. Just like a quick overview. It's weird because out of all the rosters we've seen so far, I feel like this one with the Lightning and the Sabres, I feel like it's strikingly similar. I feel like I'm seeing a team that's kind of on the reset coming down, meeting with a team that's kind of on the rise, and they've kind of met at this one point where they have some offensive star power up top. I think that Tampa edges us out here with that. But when it comes to depth, I think I'd give it to the Sabres a little bit. Not saying that Tampa's depth is bad. I just think, again, we have a better overall identity in our depth. When it comes to defense, uh, Tampa has those stars. They have, they have a Hedman, they have a Chernak. We have our Dahlin, we have our power. Couple of young guys versus a couple of older guys. And then the goaltending, I agree with Jesse. I would say we have the better 1-2 pair, but I can't speak ill will of Vasilevsky. Not yet. I'm not ready to have that conversation.
It, it doesn't matter. Vasilevsky, any good that he does, it's canceled out by the fact that his backup goaltender is Jonas Johansson. Sorry.
No
Guy only
slander of
plays
Jonas
like
Johansson
20
Absolutely
in
games
this
not.
a
meeting.
year.
Absolutely not. No, the Sabres have the better tandem just because of that. I
You
won't
have
be
no
hearing it.
idea
I will
how good
not be
Jonas
hearing it.
Johansson is. You have no idea.
On his day. On his day.
I think, looking at the Sabres forward group, they don't have a Kucherov. Um,
No,
even
definitely not.
maybe a Gensel. It's still in terms of like their wingers, they don't have a Gensel. I think their center depth. I think if all goes well for the Sabres, it's basically on par with Tampa. I think you put it a good way, Christian. It feels like these two teams are like sort of meeting in the middle somewhere, at least on paper, like heading in. I hesitate to call it the closest matchup we've seen thus far because, I think that can probably lie with some of the other teams we've covered, like the Senators and the Red Wings. But yeah, this team feels on the same tier, like the last two teams we did with Bruins and the Leafs. And while it's possible the Sabres could pass them, on paper, it's kind of tough to project that. This, I don't think it's too crazy. I think, like I said, because they have a guy like Kucherov, and I think their defense is a little more complete. I think, maybe you still give it to Tampa, but, you factor in a Hedman decline. Kucherov kind of tones it back after an insane season. I don't know. I think these lineups are pretty even. I don't know if I can give either team an edge. I think I like the star power the Sabres have on defense more. I think Hedman and McDonough, while good, I think Dahlin and Power kind of have the edge there. But like I said, with the forward group, they got that top line is kind of it's something the Sabres don't have, and even the second line, Atkinson notwithstanding. I mean, it's kind of similar. There's Jason Zucker in the top six, so can't really give the Sabres too much credit there. So I don't know. It's a tough one to call. It's a tough one to call. When we talked about the Red Wings and the Senators, because they're always compared so much, I can kind of smile and say, the Sabres are better. But here it's kind of the first one where I don't know which side to pick. It's not clear, at least I think.
Hmm.
All right. So it depends on how you're comparing them. Like if you're asking who's in a better situation going forward, I think you could argue that the Sabres are, but as opposed to who's in a better situation for this upcoming season and who could make a run, I think you have to go Tampa. And I could see them possibly getting in the playoffs with not a wild card spot and maybe bumping another team down. But
Yeah, it could easily happen. It's the norm, be the norm. If Tampa was in a divisional spot again, I wouldn't be surprised.
just like on paper right now, looking at these two, it it is where there isn't like a clear cut like, oh, this team is 100% better. Like so yeah, that's basically my analysis on it.
All right, so why don't we try to give our final thoughts here now that we've gone through this? Let's reconvene and give our final thoughts heading into next year. So, we kind of touched on it. It doesn't really seem like there's a clear winner between those two teams. Um, which is I hesitate to fall into the trap that Christian and I have fallen into, trying to predict, the Bruins' downfall. But it does sort of feel like Tampa Bay is teetering, and I think even if I feel like they're a prime wild card team still. Like I think, despite all the changes they made, I don't think I don't know if they got worse. I don't know if they got better, but I don't think they changed all too much from last year. And they were a high 90s team last year, so I guess um, it's weird to call them a prime wild card team, but I don't know. They feel, as I'm looking at it tonight, and, I'm happy to be proven wrong as soon as the season starts, but it kind of feels like they're at where Pittsburgh is at. Like they've made these changes. The core is clearly starting to fizzle out. Um, and you still got, Kucherov doing his best, or Kucherov's on that Crosby level where he's still carrying the team day in and day out, stuff like that. So they're always going to be in the race. But yeah, I feel like I think they're in danger of missing the playoffs. I don't think they're a bad team. I don't think they're not going to come in last. They're probably not going to come any lower than like fifth, but I think it could happen.
Which could still be a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. But yeah,
it's a blessing to be in an organization with a long fizzle like a Pittsburgh Penguins or a Tampa Bay Lightning or who else, like a Boston Bruins, an aging core. You think every year, oh, they're finally going to fall off a cliff. They're finally going to fall off a cliff, and they just figure out ways to get it done. That's just the sign of a good culture and a well-run organization. So, uh, again, I would not be surprised if Tampa made the playoffs again, obviously. I could see them slipping a little bit though. Again, turnover. It'll be a little bit of a readjustment, but I think John Cooper still has the tools to get this team into the playoffs and, possibly winning round. So,
I mean, coming off of a 5-game first round exit, I don't think there's much room to do that much worse as opposed to like expectations that people have. I don't expect them to miss the playoffs. I think that probably on par with expectation is probably exactly what happened last year. Is probably a wild card spot, given Toronto and Florida and Boston are just as good as last year. But given maybe a potential Boston drop off, I could see them jumping up to probably like the third place in the Atlantic, and then probably having a rough time in the first round again, unless that's Toronto. But overall, I definitely think that this season they're in a better spot than Buffalo. But looking forward, I definitely like what Buffalo's building right now, and that
I
probably
love hearing
going
that
forward.
phrase all the goddamn time.
yeah, it's like, oh, bright future.
Oh,
I hate
not
those
this
two
year.
words.
Not this
Hate
year,
those
but
words.
moving forward.
Bright future, guys.
You
Bright
know what I'm
future.
saying?
Well,
About it. This series has been, we've been too humble. This series needs some hot takes. I'm picking Tampa Bay to miss the playoffs.
I
I
like it,
think I
Jonah.
think there'll be like an 88, 89. Like I said, what Pittsburgh did. I don't know. Maybe it's the Jake Gensel effect, but I think they're at that stage where they are in danger. And I also think, they're at the point where like one bad injury, like if you know Cam Atkinson is kind of like that piece in the top six where it's like, oh, the dam's starting to break here. And then as soon as somebody like, even like a Brandon Hagel goes down, it just, you know, all the water flows down. So I don't know. I don't love. I I'm on the more pessimistic side of things with somebody like McDonough, even though I do like Moser. I don't know. I think it's time. I think it's time that
Mm.
somebody from the Atlantic Division rises up and passes them for at least fourth. So
Yeah, I want to see a change in the little
Yeah.
standing
At least
bug
just
I have
one.
in my NHL app, instead of it just being both Florida teams and then Toronto and Toronto and
Boston.
Boston.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
It definitely has to happen, and it could happen this year, but
Probably not. But I'm
we'll
picking
see.
it too. Can't wait to be wrong. All right. So I think that's going to do it for this episode. Jesse, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Stepping in for JP once again as he's on
Who?
his JP.
Who's that? I
Yeah,
haven't heard of that.
doesn't
That's
matter.
a name I haven't heard in a long
You
time.
probably won't hear about him for a while longer. He's got his nose in some textbook. So, Jesse, thank you once again. Thank you for joining us. And the door is open. If you want to come and crap on the Panthers party next week as we wrap up this
Oh,
series,
I would love nothing
you
more.
are more than welcome to join.
Oh, but yeah, thanks for having me on again. Second time I think I did better than the first time where I was probably stuttering a little bit more when I'm nervous talking in front of my computer screen. But I'm just glad that my Amazon gift card that I used on this microphone finally got put
Finally,
to good use.
finally
So
paid off.
yeah,
Business expense.
I'm just
Yeah,
buzzing.
we'll write
I'm
it
buzzing.
off. All right, so everybody, thank you very much for listening and or watching on YouTube, and we will see you guys next week for the finale. See you guys next time, and as always, go Sabres.
Go Sabres.
Go Sabres.